Just because we got a lot on the work session, we want to make sure we get through all of it. So first on the work session agenda is Piper Sandler financial introduction. Afternoon. Thank you, sir.
Hello, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
I want to say thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to come before you and present this information. I want to ask your forgiveness, though. We were not able to get this in a PowerPoint form, we did it on the electronic schedule there, but I got it in physical form, there for you, so.
We like the physical better anyway.
Okay, awesome. Yes, ma'am. You saw my face? Oh, well, I can, if I need to. Yeah, there it is. Okay. But it is a pleasure to be before you here tonight just to present this information. My name is Walter Lewis. I'm an investment banker with Piper Sandler, accompanied by Jonathan McCoy, who's here. He's in our Mobile office, actually, and wanted to just give you all an opportunity to maybe ask some questions along the way. I'm definitely interested in just having an opportunity here in the city to actually do some financing work here. And I wanted to get before you all as a council just to present the platform of Piper Sandler. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you could turn to page 3 of this report that I just gave you there, realize the power of partnerships. And that's kind of the scope in terms of how I work personally. I enjoy getting with people and taking a complicated matter and breaking it down to where you get it. And that's very important to me from a standpoint of being an investment banker. One of the things that Piper really prides itself on is his reputation in terms of a client-first approach. I take the same position as a banker myself. There then having strategic type advisory relationships there, that's another aspect in terms of being able to have experts to execute a transaction. I've had the privilege over the last year or so to meet with various members of the council and the administration, just talking through various things. And I have looked at just aspects of the city that would love to bring some of the expertise and the knowledge that Piper has, associated with that. From an investment banking standpoint, public finance is the area that we work primarily in, and being able to do those types of things. Municipal underwritings, tax-exempt bonds, that's what we focus on from a standpoint of financing for municipalities. Of course, there are two other areas of expertise that Piper focuses in on. Mergers and acquisitions, that won't be applicable here with the city, but it's just an opportunity there from a standpoint of this firm in terms of what it could offer the city from a standpoint of investment banking. If you turn to the next page 4, to me, in terms of the history of this company, Piper Sandler, 1895 is when it started. And it's created a platform over a period of time, over 120 years of success. And that platform is continuing forward. We just had a change in leadership in terms of who's running the show in public finance. They've invested in two young guys that can take the company forward from a standpoint of public finance there in the firm. You can see the history. I want to call attention to 2020. September 11th, when they had the attack on the towers there in New York. One of the firms that was in that tower was Sandler O'Neill, and that firm, the guy who started the firm, he was actually killed in the attack, there. So from a standpoint of this particular moment here, I'm gonna just want y'all to just circle that 2020, because I think in terms of some of the things that we wanted to present to the city, I'm gonna bring that particular year to your attention relative to Piper Sandler and what that means there. Next page here on page 5. You can see in terms of financing in Alabama, I want to say this: we are not the top firm in the state of Alabama in terms of deals done. One of my competitors that's done that from a standpoint of what they do in the state of Alabama. Piper Sandler is a national firm. We have 2 offices here now in Alabama. Been here since 2012. We'll get there. I put some tombstones there so you can see some of the issuers that we work with. Mobile County has been a client of ours since 2019. Daphne, they've been a client of ours since 2020, and the list is beginning to grow. Summerdale, we just did a transaction for them from an economic development standpoint relative to what they're trying to do economically for the town. If you look over to the left in terms of a deal team, Peter Stetler is an ex-Fitch guy who does a lot of technical analysis in terms of credit relative to cities and counties that we work with. And Dimitri, he sends economic research. He does economic research all the time. We get emails from him at 6 a.m. in the morning all the time. So if you're an economic buff, if you want access to economic information, I can hook you up with him at any time, there. Steve Cavalier, great trader for Piper. He's been with Piper for quite some time. He's our lead trader, backed by Christian Gottman. We have several traders all over the country, but those 2 are the ones that in this particular sector that we'll be working with on this particular transaction. Matt Morrell, he's a private placement trader that we have. We'll talk about private placements in a moment and what they are. Again, I think that may be an area that where it'd be very helpful to the city from a standpoint of how the city may want to approach financing opportunities for the city. I put 3 other tombstones there: the Alabama Public Schools, Cooper Green Healthcare, Birmingham Airport. We do a variety of different things, and we have that capability as a firm. Turn over to page 6. You can kind of see what it looks like from a standpoint of locale in terms of where we've done business since 2012 being here. The list is bigger than what this map is saying. It's just not enough room to put those on there. But you can see locally down to the left corner in terms of what's going on in your area in terms of where we've been able to penetrate and do transactions relative to the area. If you turn over to page 7, on the left-hand side there, you can kind of see what Piper's done since 2012, but the 3rd bullet point is my history. I've been doing this for 30 years. I went to the University of Alabama in terms of my degree. I'm actually an electrical engineer by degree, but I chose to go into the financial industry. One of your council members actually works for a firm that I used to work for years ago up in Huntsville, there. And I thought that was interesting when I met him. But I was there at the very beginning when everything started, and he kind of got in on the tail end of it in terms of what's going on with that firm. So there's some similarities there. Done over $23 billion in financings. I've actually called on the city of Fairhope over the years from time to time. And I'm here again. Would love an opportunity to, sequester an opportunity to be able to work here. I think there's a lot of value here in the city in terms of what you all are trying to do. And I think some of that value that Piper can bring to the table, we would bring it to you where you could get what you are looking for from a financing perspective there. Jonathan McCoy behind me, right here. He's in our Mobile office. We just started that office. It's been about a year now, Jonathan? About a year. But he is from Mobile. He's been an analyst for Piper for over 13 years. He wanted to get into the investment banking side. If we're working here for you, he will definitely assist me in regards to what we're trying to do for the city from a finance standpoint. Outstanding person, outstanding analyst. It's going to be an outstanding banker in the communities around here over the future there. If you notice over to the right, I have highlighted in blue. These are areas that I've just analyzed with the city, your water, sewer, gas, electric. We're comfortable in that space. General obligation issues that we've done in this area, we're comfortable in that space as well. We're really comfortable in all these areas. Did 102 million airport deal, but that's not the focus. I'm just focusing on the Fairhope area in terms of what's potentially around you. I got some state stuff there. I've had some conversations about the bridge that they're talking about taking across the bay with the state in reference to that. So these are just things that are going on right now close to you relative to there. As you thumb through this, you'll see in blue I'll have these areas highlighted. But on page 8 there, if you look at that map, you can kind of see where we're located. Piper Sandler is a firm that's based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and but they've extended their arms all over the country in terms of bringing expertise to municipalities there. Next page, if you go to page 9, you can see again and highlighted in blue just areas of interest right as we speak relative to Fairhope. But one of the areas I want to call to your attention, if you look down at that bottom, it says stats that matter. In the middle, it says underwriting capacity. That's $3.1 billion in terms of being able to underwrite a transaction. What that means is when we do a transaction, if that market were to run in the opposite direction, we have the capacity to be able to step in and settle the interest rate at what we quoted it to you at. If we won't let it run with the market, we'll step in and take advantage of that, okay? Then in terms of, I'm going to get to ranking, and oh yeah, here we go. Go to the next page, page 10. Here are our 2022 rankings. This is across the country. Piper in 2022 did 714 transactions. That ranked us number 2 in the nation. And it's not number 1 in the state or number 1 it's number 2 in the country in terms of deals done. That's a lot of deals done across the board, but what that does for a city or a town, to get those many deals done in the marketing aspect of things, that gives you exposure. That exposure equates to you from a standpoint of interest costs. The more exposure you have, the more competition's on the table relative to interest costs to where you can drive your interest costs down there. So that's something that's very, very important, I think, for the city of Fairhope relative to what we have here. Next page is the capital in terms, this page here is just talking about committing capital. It's what I just mentioned to you just a moment ago. At $3.1 billion, sitting right there. If a market goes in an opposite direction relative to what we're about, then we have the capital to do that. This is just a chart showing you how we underwrite bonds, in the market. I'm going to pause there for 1 second before I go to the private placement stuff. Just see if there are any questions that you may have. Are there any questions or thoughts? Not at this moment. Okay. Let's go to the next page. In terms of private placements. Private placements are basically bank loans or institutional loans where you have one investor that you can call on and actually execute and expedite a transaction there. Piper, since 2018, has been number 1 in the nation in terms of doing private placements. One of the reasons we have a dedicated desk. That's all they do is arrange and set up transactions for issuers, relative to that particular market in terms of what we cater to from a standpoint of financing projects there. And this process is a very unique process. We do bonds and we do private placements. In your situation here with the city, we can actually put both deals on the track together to where you got public issuance of debt or private placement debt. And what we do is we weigh the difference and give you those options to be able to pick one or the other based on what's best for the city, there. And your Capital One is a big buyer of private placement debt. PNC Bank is a big buyer of private placement debt. You have lots of local entities here relative to the private placement aspect of things where, yeah, it's local, but what we bring to the table is we bring a national flavor into the equation to where you can put pressure on the locals to be able to generate the best rate. And that's what cities, counties, or whoever's issuing bonds or doing private placements you want. You want to be able to put, the lender in a position to where you can generate the best interest costs for you as a city. And with, having the influx of opportunities like that, or having the market that we have, we can actually do that to help, generate a better rate for you all. If you turn to page 14, I put this slide in here for this one specific purpose. If you look at, it says types of accounts over to the right. You see that 1867? In 2020, Sadler O'Neill's was acquired by Piper Sandler, okay? What that acquisition did for Piper Sandler was it opened, Sadler O'Neill really catered to private banks. It opened up banking institutions there to where we have a direct relationships with those banking institutions so that, it creates opportunities for cities relative to that. That acquisition, put cities and counties in a position to where they can get the best attention in terms of possibilities of lending when the transaction is actually done. There. I thought that was a great slide to actually put in there as it relates to Sadler O'Neill and that particular transaction, because it does impact you in a big way from a standpoint of how you borrow and when you borrow or who you borrow with in the marketplace. I'm gonna skip this next slide, slide 15. There, it's just it talks about positioning, introducing, communicating, negotiating, creating competition, and successful closing. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've had opportunities to talk with various ones of you over the last year. And one of the things I've been just analyzing and understanding how you all operate as a town is giving me a chance to do a lot of that, with what you see on that flow chart before you. In terms of, if you turn to page, turn to page 17, I want to give you a market update. Here's where the market is as of 2018. I thought this was a simple chart where you could get it. When you do public debt, you look at MMD in terms of how that market is. And if you see the black, I believe, is 10-year, and the blue is a 30-year MMD. And if you notice over to the far left, you're up at 3.5%. The city of Fairhope, in my opinion, would be a very good credit, and you would trade with a spread that's really tight there, and it will be above where you see those lines. You can see in 18, you were at a 3.5. If you go right over here to 2023, there you can see you're up at 4%, and in some instances, close to 4.5%. In the middle, you can see where rates were low, but here we are where rates are climbing. And you can see, I don't know what's going to happen between now and later, but here's just a snapshot of 5 years of where rates were and where they've gone, and in terms of how they can impact you as a town, there. I have an appendix in the back. I'm not going to get into the appendix. That's just your debt as we see it there, and if there are questions relative to that, I would love to entertain those.
Council, any questions at this point? Any comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So what you're saying on this one slide where you're talking about, just to clarify, I was trying to follow, where you're talking about the type of account, and it says U.S. and it has 1,867.
Yes.
Those are the amount of relationships that you have with banks?
Those are direct relationships that we have with banks.
All right.
You know, that benefits you all as an issuer because of those relationships. And those relationships came because of the transaction that took place with Sadler O'Neill.
Very good.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, there. Any other questions?
Council? Doesn't look like it.
But look, I want to thank you all for just giving me this platform to be able to present this information. I'm definitely interested in an opportunity to work with you as an underwriter or a placement agent because I really feel like Piper can bring this town value, and where the town can be proud of the value that they get from a standpoint of what we are able to do. Would love an opportunity to work with you.
Thank you so much for
Yes.
being here.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Boone,
Apologize.
anytime you want to talk about
I
it, just
sure
let
will.
me know. Yeah.
All right. Next up is discussion for creating an appeals process for the sign ordinance and violations. Judge Snedeker, welcome.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. I've been speaking with the city prosecutor, city attorney Marcus McDowell over the course of a few years. We've started to see an increase in cases involving sign ordinance appeals. And just from my experience in the private sector, dealing with some development, it's very rare to have an appeal process from the sign ordinance, a sign ordinance appeal go to the municipal court. And with you being an attorney, the standard review is, does it meet the sign ordinance or not? I don't have any latitude as far as equity to say, for instance, that the Five Below sign, he's got some kind of hardship and he's allowed to paint the facade blue. When, in fact, his sign didn't meet the ordinance, but yet he appealed it to the city court. And I think, in speaking with Marcus, it might be just a recommendation to the city council and the city attorney to have a discussion about a different avenue for appeals, for sign ordinance appeals. And the same thing goes for PUD violations. I think those are probably, my recommendation or my opinion is those are more civil avenues than criminal. And eventually, the way it works now, I assume, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, after they appeal to me in the city court, their only recourse after that, it would be a circuit court appeal. Would it be a suit against the city at that point, rather than?
It'd be an appeal from the denial of any kind of relief, but there's no relief to be given. You can't amend anything, change anything based on hardship. It's only does it meet the standards, and typically the city folks that are doing it, Kim Burmeister, and those are spot on with their interpretation, and so there's really nothing to go up and appeal. And I think so far, we haven't had any appeals to circuit court because everybody sees that there's no avenue up there to do anything. The jury couldn't do anything, couldn't change it, so.
Yeah. This is something that, we've discussed in the past, and I've brought this to my constituents' attention. We've just had so many avenues that have come up, but it's something that we've talked about a lot as far as the flexibility and having it a little bit more malleable as far as the process. We talked about that as well with the tree committee. There's several things that I think that we could keep in-house before it reaches a court level to resolve, because once it reaches the courts, it's rigid, as you all are speaking. There's no flexibility, and I think the signs, especially with the technology and the things that are happening with signage, it should have a process where it goes through a board of adjustments or appeal and then back to the council on certain occasions to make those decisions, in my opinion. I've also talked to Hunter about this in the past as well. So I'm for that, for sure, if we can come up with a process. I think it'd be better for the citizens and the business people around town.
And every city, every county that I've worked in is different. Some appeals process are to a board of adjustments, and some are to a planning commission, then with another level appeal to the city council, and then it would go on to whatever the next court, general sessions to circuit or wherever, depending where you are. It's just something I thought you guys might want to consider. And the same thing with PUD violations. We've had a few in the past, and it's hard really to pin down the person that's responsible for the PUD violations, especially if it has something to do with a failure of the infrastructure and a development or something like that. It seems like those are more suited. And this is nothing that you guys have done. It's just been on the books forever. It's probably just something to be cleaned up over time. I know you guys are busy with a bunch of other stuff. This isn't like a super pressing point in municipal court. It's just we've seen a few more over the last few years, and it's probably time to get ahead of it.
Do we think, in sort of thinking through times where there may be a hardship as it relates to the sign ordinance, for example, do we think the Board of Adjustments is the best place for that appeal to go at this point?
I was thinking come back to council on those particular matters. I was thinking come back to council at some point.
Yeah, either council or board of adjustment, but then you don't want it clogging up.
If the Board of
Council meeting,
Adjustments,
if that's the case.
yeah, if the Board of Adjustments can't make a decision, then instead of going to the court, maybe it comes back to council and, before it goes. I mean, that was what we talked about.
The sign ordinance was actually pulled from the zoning ordinance in 2015. For what reasons, I wasn't here. There was some issues with writing tickets and violations, but it was pulled out. Before then, it did go to Board of Adjustment. The end result's the same. I don't think a sign ordinance, unless you have a design review committee, or can really be malleable. It is rules, and a hardship has to be proven, but could certainly be brought back into the zoning ordinance. We'd have to figure out the ticketing and violations. That kind of gets a little unclear, but I think the end result would be the same at Board of Adjustment. The hardships are very limited.
I think it had to do with enforcement, Hunter, at that time. And that's why we
Maybe so.
standalone. And some of that has changed with SB 107 now, I believe. That's changed that dynamic maybe, but that was.
Yeah, and I would love
The
to
reason that was
get,
done that way.
yeah, I'd love to understand that a little bit better so that we can make sure, but from a perspective of bringing it back into the zoning ordinance, that's not easy to do, but we can accommodate that. And Board of Adjustment, we'd have to change their bylaws a little bit, but it's been that way before. So, and then if there's appeal from Board of Adjustments, if it's in the zoning ordinance, it can go to Planning Commission and we'd have to look at that right procedure. I guess you could do a conditional use that would make it go to City Council if you want to hear those.
Let me ask Marcus and Judge Snedeker, how prevalent are these? How often does this come before you in municipal court?
I've had 3 of them this year already, 5 Below, who else brought?
Walmart.
Yeah,
It's
Walmart.
getting more
So those
prevalent with the
mostly related to
corporate folks
signs?
coming in.
Yes.
And the reason I ask, like on a PUD, if there's a PUD violation, sometimes do you want it to go to the Board of Adjustments or do you want it to go to the court? Let's say that they weren't maintaining their retention pond and therefore they
I think that's a
they
different,
were flooding the streets and it
That's
might be that a fine needs to be handed out to a violator such as that.
And I
not
definitely
sure
need to
about
get
that.
some information on that.
Yeah,
'Cause
I'm not sure
we
about
haven't had a
PUD, but
PUD
the
violation
signs.
in 5 years since I've been here. I know there's some legitimacy, but I don't know what that one is. So we'd have to figure out where that one goes.
Yeah, so
But-
maybe
but-
we might want to treat these as separate.
Separate things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm seeing more is when they are denied a sign permit because it's non-conforming, like they're requesting an off-site sign. Remember we had an off-site sign one?
Outside sign with
Yeah.
Publix up here.
Yeah, and so they've been denied a sign, so they appeal it to me like I didn't get my sign permit. Give me a
Right.
sign. I'm like, well, I can't give you a sign. You
Yeah.
can't paint the whole building blue. Like, it's pretty clear that you can't do it, but they don't have another avenue to talk at that point.
But that's the rigidity I mean when I say the rigidity, Hunter,
Yeah.
where people have options, where it's just not, you go to a wall and that's it. That's what I mean by not in lowering our standards.
Right.
But just having another review, someone to talk to prove their hardship or whatever standard we want to meet.
Sure. And I think
And I just.
BOA would work in that role. And I will tell you, as an aside, we've got some money in the budget to actually go out and hire a company, kind of take a look at our sign ordinance. Because there's been some federal changes and decisions at the Supreme Court that we really need to kind of take a look at when you look at content-based signs. And that's why some of the rigidity's there when you do a sign ordinance. That's something that we've kind of already got on our slate this year to accommodate. Fortunately, some of those tie back to the zoning ordinance, which we're also, once we get through with this comp plan, as you all know, we've got to make some amendments to that, which will align, it's kind of chicken or egg. Ideally, we amend our zoning ordinance and then the sign ordinance, so.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between enforcing one on somebody that's installed one or let one lapse in maintenance. Like, that may be the right avenue to come to the municipal court for a fine or some sort of a sanction there, but for a denial of a permit, it's probably, I mean, that's what we're seeing. It's probably not the right process.
And I
to
can
go.
tell you, Kim and Christina spend a lot of time explaining to people, this is not going to be fruitful. You know, the sign ordinance is very clear, but we see, and most of the folks that are from the area really, you know, kind of get through and work with us, but you see a lot of corporate folks that don't have direct contact. They hire a sign company who hires a subcontractor for their local sign. So you're 4 steps away from the people making the decisions, and they just say, well, we got to try. What's the fee? It's not too much for them. Time is not, they're not being punished by time. So they do it even at our request. So I'm on board with figuring out another way in those situations, even if the answer is ultimately no.
Yeah.
Right.
We're kind of already moving toward that direction. So with some time now, another option we've looked at, Mobile, for example, they had quite a few committees. They just did a consolidated review committee. It kind of ties into signage, historic preservation. There's all kind of things that don't merit their own committee, but they have a group of people that may be an option and something we've looked at. And there's other cities that actually work with whoever's coming in to give them not just here's the standards, but here's why we do it, and kind of become helpful in the design of signs.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I have a big concern with the rigidity of it. I mean, I think the rigidity gives you the same result each time, which is kind of what you're looking for in the law. I do think doesn't make sense for them to be coming to municipal court when they don't get their sign. I mean, if they have put a sign up against the determination of the city, that's one thing, but just, I didn't get my sign, let me come into municipal court to petition to the court to change that. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. All right.
Council President, if I may, now, so by the time it gets to the municipal court, has the code enforcement officer, or maybe they're not an officer, may not be the correct terminology, they may not be a member of the police department, but say Kim brings this issue to you, would she come to you, Hunter, and say, what do you think about this? Do you think this is a violation of the sign ordinance or not? And only then would she elevate it to the court. So, and I really don't think there's any more people qualified in the city, including the Board of Adjustment, that's more qualified than what Hunter, you and your staff are qualified to make that decision upon.
Right.
So it seems like if they had their chance and you decided that they were in violation of the sign ordinance, it's only then that it goes to the court. So.
Right. And it's
I mean,
not just me.
At what point, I mean, if, let's say they have an appeals to the Board of Adjustments, I just don't think they're as expert as you are, so I want to keep that in mind.
I don't mean to interrupt you, I think you were directing to Hunter, but I think you're talking about a violation. If somebody puts up a sign that's too big or wrong color, or they go in and replace a structure and do something else, that is a violation of the ordinance, and that would come to us no matter what.
That's not a problem.
That's not a
No, we
problem.
can handle those.
The issue is if they're making an application to the city and the city denies that permit to either change branding size or color, size, scope, and the city says no.
So this is when Hunter and staff say no, and they
Yeah,
don't.
And
They don't
usually
like
at least
that.
4, maybe 5 people take a review of it. It
That's a
escalates to
different
me.
avenue than what I was
Yeah,
And-
that's
That's
what
totally-
that's where I think there's a
That's
difference.
totally different than what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
Denial And what this is, you know, once it's denied, you can't put up a sign that's 3 times bigger than what, you know, the city says, or you can't use 2 sides because you don't qualify as a 2-sided builder. Streets on both sides.
Yeah.
That then comes to us, and we look at what the ordinance says, and, you know, Kim's and Hunter are right in line with what the ordinance says. The judge really doesn't have much discretion except to say, sorry, I'm denying your appeal. There's
So
really
where does
no-
where does that put that citizen at that point? Just square one, like he just has to follow that ordinance? There's
Follow
no
the ordinance.
bending or
Right. I
anything?
mean, they can appeal
So-
to circuit court, but there's really not gonna be relief in it. They don't have any equitable powers necessarily to amend it and say, yeah, you're really on 2 sides and you can put on both sides, you know, like, you know, I don't mean to be, I'm not picking on Five Below, but they requested 2 signs or signs on either side of their building because they're on a corner building. But our ordinance says you have to front 2 separate streets, and they don't front 2 streets. They front a parking lot and then also a street, and so they only get 1 sign. And they requested 2, and it's just not allowed in our ordinance, and
You
so.
have a committee to tell them that they're not on 2 streets?
Yeah,
If it's only 3 or 4 though a year, I mean, that could come back to the council.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so,
But I
so
think
what I
we
was
don't
thinking.
wanna, we don't wanna be too flexible on the ordinance,
Right.
cause then we're gonna
And that's the
create-
procedure you think we're
I
missing.
get it.
If you wanted the malleability, we don't have it.
I guess I'm just
Even in
sitting here
our
trying to
current
think, what is a hardship that we?
Like off-site signage.
That's one.
We've
Yeah,
seen a
that
few
is-
of those. And what you'll see too, we had 1 or 2 on the ones that light up,
Yeah, interior.
interior signs and windows.
Yeah, that was something that, we had one of those, a citizen came to me about that particular incident. It's a technology deal because signs now are digital. And I think at a particular time, the sign had some light to it, nothing nuisance or anything, but by the law, it could not have any light to it after a particular amount of time or a particular time of the night. When you go by there and you see it, you're like, okay, come on. Like, you know what I mean? But at that point, they're done. You know, there's no other, come by and see it, take a look, what do you think? It's over, it's no. And I just thought that, I don't know.
And I guess
You know,
where
that
I'm
should be a
coming
little bit more.
from, in my experience, is if you, just from my private practice, if I'm denied a sign permit, then I would just, you know, litigate with the city and not go through the municipal court because it's not a criminal action or an enforcement action at that point.
Yeah.
We're not really an appeal body, and that's what we're getting at, because
Yeah.
I don't have any latitude to do that.
Right.
And I think it's probably doing a disservice to some of the people that are utilizing that right now, because like you just said, these corporate attorneys come in from Mobile or Birmingham, and they know it's fruitless to come in and do it, but they're going to ask anyway, because that's the process. So, and it's not a tremendous amount of time, but it's just not the right, doesn't seem like it's the right avenue.
And it is for us. It's tremendous
No,
amount of time.
but
It's a lot of waste of time.
Spill into the building department as well? What if the builder, Eric, do you have disputes with, you know, inspections and the way they want to construct something and they want to appeal it and say, I don't agree with what you're telling me, I built it to code and you said you didn't? I mean, do we need to think about that as well?
Well, one of the things, and I've been in discussions with Marcus and Chris, because we had that, we've never had anybody take it to that point, but the council passed an ordinance for a building code board of appeals, and that's what's listed in the building code, because the zoning board of adjustment legally cannot hear building code questions. And so I'm still working with Chris on that. But we have an ordinance passed with bylaws forming that board. We've never had anything come up, so we've never had a startup meeting with it, but it was suggested to me very recently, we need to go ahead and do that.
And we review those permits. A sign has a separate permit that goes to Eric, but we review those. That's where Kim and Christine are reviewing those. So a lot of times it's not caught.
Yeah, well, memory
By-
serves, the reason it was pulled out of the zoning ordinance because the council at the time wanted it enforced in the police jurisdiction, and it could not be enforced in the police jurisdiction if it was part of the zoning ordinance.
That's exactly why we did the sign.
That's why they pulled it out of the zoning ordinance at
exactly
the
why we
time,
did
was
the sign
to get it in the
ordinance.
police jurisdiction.
And you do need, there needs to be a tie, so then in these violations, we can go to court, but not for the reviews. I agree with that.
Right.
100%. So how we, if we're going to move it back into the zoning ordinance, we probably still need to have something in our municipal code for the violation section that's clearly not just an appeal.
Violation can still exist under the code, but the appeal process from a denial would be what you would look for.
We'll have to create that.
I think
There's
that,
more work, sorry.
I think that seems
It's
right.
okay. It's okay. Very good. We'll get there.
All right, thank you, guys.
Okay, I have one more
Yeah.
point to just bring up to you guys that we've been looking at in the municipal court. We have a corrections fund. I know you guys are familiar with that. It's a creature of statute that allows us to assess each case to earmark for a corrections fund, which could be used to help operate the court and the jail. And historically, we've been one of the jurisdictions in the county that has been on the lower range. I've never discussed raising it. It's really a city decision to raise it. Right now, we are, we're looking at, I think we are $25 a case on our current corrections fund. $25 for traffic and $25 for misdemeanors, which are added on top, which are included in our court costs. We have the ability, we're allowed to charge as much court costs as the county. And right now, the county, we cannot exceed the county court costs in any case, but we can match the county court costs. And just to give you an idea of where we are in relation to the county, district court traffic court costs are $220. We are currently at $171.50 for a difference of $48.50. On misdemeanors, the district court's at $322, and we're at $219. So that's a difference of $103. So we're falling, as far as traffic costs go in the county with the other municipalities, we're falling in the lower, 20% of the county. And with Loxley and a few other jurisdictions that quite honestly don't have jails, and they pay Robertsdale or they pay Daphne to house their inmates. On the misdemeanor side, we're considerably lower. Most everyone's, pushing the county court costs on misdemeanors. So I think we've been hesitant to even bring this up because it's difficult financially on a lot of defendants, and I'm sensitive to that because we see a lot of people with the inability to pay, and we got to be conscious of that. But we also, we can't continue to operate at a complete deficit either, and I know we do. And I think we have an opportunity here to increase our court costs, but not to the point that it becomes overly burdensome on the defendants here. And, we got rid of that. For a short time, we had a payment program that helped us collect fines and costs for a very short time, and it just didn't work. We do a really good job in-house of working out time for people to pay their fines and costs, and we've got some other vehicles we're using to recuperate some old fines and costs. But as much as I don't want to raise it, I think we need to be more in line with the other municipalities and underneath the county being the highest that we could set our court costs. So with your permission, I'd like, to discuss with the city attorney about potentially making a recommendation to raise those assessments would help us, subsidize some of the, I'll just tell you, I know the costs in the jail. I get requests all the time about health issues of letting people out of the jail. The jail's a pretty high burden. It's a benefit that you can't really put a value on, but it's a burden you can easily put a number on when you look at it on paper. With a lot of the health issues we see, we let people out pretty quickly, and there's a lot of burden that goes onto the jail with costs. So we can also help operate the municipal court with those funds too. So I think there's an opportunity for some extra revenue without necessarily putting too much of an undue burden on the people that we see in here. So just wanted to put that on your radar and maybe speak with the city attorney about it.
Judge Snedeker, that doesn't take any of the money away from the fines. That's just an add-on cost to court costs, right?
It's an add-on cost.
I don't feel sorry for the people having to pay it. No matter their condition, because if you can't pay the fine, don't do the crime. Real simple, right there. It's a deterrent.
So if we were to raise them $25 a case, and we'd still be underneath the county, we'd be on the higher third of the rest of the municipalities. You have the potential, I don't want to throw numbers around because the ebb and flow of the caseload is pretty substantial, but you're looking at the potential for almost six figures. And that's It's a big difference.
Just raising it to the $25?
We're seeing over 2,000 cases a year.
That's what I was gonna ask you, the volume, is, because, so that would determine how much you wanna raise it, is the volume.
And the majority of what we
Sam
see is
Walton.
traffic. The majority of what we see is traffic. So,
Is that fair? Is that enough? It's 25?
fair, I mean, what's fair? I think we're overdue, and I take some of the responsibility. I'd hate to put that burden on people, but I think it's something that we can't avoid anymore. The cost of operating the court and the cost of operating the jail is high. And we haven't kept up with the consumer price index, so to
Wage
speak.
inflation, they're making more.
Everybody,
Yeah.
yeah.
In reality, you say, I hate putting a burden, as if they have a choice. They do have a choice. Don't do it. You don't have that burden. A
That's-
burden, to me, is something that, you add a tax to groceries, or you get, something you have to have. That would be a burden. This, to me, is not a burden.
Yeah.
This is a cost.
Man.
I think, yes. I
I
don't disagree. I don't disagree. I don't want to unduly burden, I don't want to unduly burden anyone.
I'm just saying, there's tickets, man.
Yeah, you don't want to get in trouble, don't do anything wrong.
I'll drive home real slow tonight.
I know that's right. I guess I'm gonna go slow too, because I'm guilty.
Don't get behind me, because everybody blows their horn at me.
But no, that seems very
I
reasonable.
wouldn't consider that a
It
burden.
does.
I don't want to
think
unduly
25
burden anyone
seems-
with
I mean,
excessive
that-
fines and costs.
Yeah, I think.
And I
that's-
said, I had the latitude to set the fines, so we don't ever have really excessive fines on, most traffic citations are
Okay.
$20 and
I
then you
got
pay
you.
your costs of court.
So
The
that makes me
lion's
feel a
share of
lot
what
better.
people pay are the costs.
Gotcha.
And,
Yeah.
Oh,
That
Max?
makes me feel better.
yeah, I don't want people showing up at my house. Okay.
All right.
You guys have any questions about how the correction funds operate?
I want to
Or
ask
anything?
you a question about the court. We're growing, this city is growing a lot. I mean, are we having enough court sessions? Do we need to expand the court times? I mean, it's been the same as long as I can remember, and the city's grown 20%, so. And you don't even necessarily, you can think about that, but it's been on my mind for a while. Are we able to process all the cases that we have come through here?
I can answer part of that, and when I first started with Tut, working with him 17 years ago, a little over 17 years ago, we started at 5 and went till we got through, and that's slowly crept back down. Now I'm here typically at 2:15 to 3 o'clock, and we're meeting lawyers at 3 o'clock, 2 hours ahead of our previously scheduled court time. So we've added however many, days or court sessions that would otherwise, amount to. So effectively, to answer your question, yes, we have, and we've done that through basically expanding our court
You've
hours.
expanded your hours 40%.
We've moved up, we've moved the court date up to, essentially, we'll start taking cases at 3 o'clock as opposed to 4 o'clock. And we don't normally go past 8 o'clock. If we have a trial, and sometimes we get out within, 3 hours. It really just depends. But we've discussed some different structure with doing arraignment dates where they enter their plea of guilty or not guilty, and if they're not guilty, then we set a trial date off in the future. So then the only cases you're hearing are people that are pleading guilty, and then the other people getting their discovery. In my experience, and I'll let Marcus speak for himself, is that what that does is it creates a monster super court date, 6 weeks out or 2 months out, and then you go from having pretty consistent court dates to having, oh, well, that's a trial date. You're going to go from 3 until 10 o'clock at night. And this way, I felt like we've been pretty consistent.
In addition to, the police force has, it's like you're having two court dates a month, you're having one with one shift and then another one with another shift. So, if I'm looking at Jamie Westbrook's tickets, I know I'm gonna go on the X date of the month. When you have those super dockets, like some of the other municipalities, you've got every police officer and their mother in there, and you're paying them sometimes overtime to be there. And this way, they know what date they're supposed to be there. And, we've got date 1, we got date 2, and we're not doing a lot of crossover at all. So I think it's more efficient the way we're doing it based off, kind of dealing dealing with other jurisdictions, but,
Stands to reason you'd reach a point at which, though, you can't do it any earlier. Because you-
There will be a point in the future. There will be a point. My
3 to
feeling
1
is we're not there.
11 a.m. and-
Or have it 1 month, every other month is 3 court dates. I think that's where you end up. I don't think we're Daphne where you have one every night, every Tuesday night for a month. I just think they have one every Tuesday night, don't they?
Yeah, they're known for that. They give a lot of tickets.
And one thing I didn't say earlier, and I will say this, the code enforcement folks, Kim, Burmeister, and all them. And I'll tell you, for doing this as long as I have, when I see them in court, that historically means that they have told somebody 10 different times to get the truck out of the driveway or, cut their grass or do whatever. We have a good code enforcement, and that's not, I look at every case independently, though. But they do come in with a reputation as, I know when I see them walk in here, because they don't want to be in here on a Wednesday night, sitting here waiting to hear the case. So when I see them come in, I know that they've given people the benefit of the doubt for the most part. And same thing with the dog catchers,
And what we try to do, just to kind of let you know, and this may be just informative stuff, with Kim and some of the other folks, we typically put them on call and just say, hey, can we give you a 30 to 45-minute call window? Go ahead, go home, do whatever you got to do normally. And if we can't work something out and we've got a trial, then we'll call them back in and they come in. So it's not a regular occurrence that the judge is going to get to see them, but when he does, he knows, we're going to have to.
Probably going to be a trial.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Very good.
Council, any other questions for Judge Snedeker? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John.
Appreciate it. All right, moving on. Item 3, we're going to postpone item 3? All right. All right, item 4, budget discussions.
Good evening. Y'all have the PowerPoint presentation in a paper form, and also we have, you were given your books 2 weeks ago, and we had a few adjustments, and so I gave you I actually emailed everyone, and also you have in your packet is your budget adjustments that were done. So, but we'll start with the budget highlights. So starting with talking about we've spent, this budget will consist of a lot of infrastructure that's going on. So for the utilities is $42.6 million in system improvements, $2.3 million in road resurfacing on streets and parking lots and drainage, $1.8 million in traffic improvements, $2.6 million in sidewalk construction projects. Do you have any questions on those? And in the presentation, we'll go into more detail. A highlight is protecting our natural environment for enjoyment for our patrons and maintaining safe, clean, pleasant parks and designated recreation areas and facilities. And we're spending $6.1 million in parks and recreation facilities investment. Have any questions on those? The next, we're spending $2.5 million investments in the K-1 Center. And then item number 3, Mayor, do you want to go over the personnel? Any issues with personnel? Okay.
So in your budget book and also in your on your seat tonight, you had a sheet that was there that looks like this. Find it. It looks like this. We blew it up so everybody could see it.
Thank you.
There you go. And it basically tells you there are 16 new positions throughout the city. That is across general government and the utilities. And you will see on there that there are some new positions, there's some reclassifications, there's some change from part-time. And at the bottom of this, you will see that there is, that's where we're doing some transfers. And then we have this sheet. Is this the right sheet? No, that's not the right sheet. Did they have the one that says defund and that's in their budget book?
Yes. They have,
Oh, here we go.
yes.
Sorry, it was just on my fold. So you also see in this column right here, where it'll say where we're defunding positions. That's a lot of times if we're reclassifying something, we're defunding another position to reclassify it at the top. And that's how we presented this to you the past couple of years. It seems to work, seems to be pretty self-explanatory, but I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to, the personnel budget. I did want to address too this year that we are budgeting flat. You will see that we are budgeting flat in salaries as compared to last year's budget. This year we were around 85 to 86% staffed. So we were able to take that extra $3 million in salaries and absorb our cost of living increases as well as any merit increases and the new positions in that figure, hoping that next year, if we can get close to fully staffed, that number will kind of level out for us. But there is the possibility that we may have to come back to the council, for additional funds 6 months in or a little bit longer if we were at about 95% staffed to 100% staffed. But again, we're running about 85% staffed right now, 86%.
So, yeah, it's not, how much, just how much value do you put in, not value, but how much expectations do you have for us to get to 100%? Just to put that out, not percentage-wise, 50, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the, so I
Right.
think that's where we're.
No, I think, I would love to say that we'll be 100% staffed, but
Right.
through just attrition and retirements and different things,
It's hard.
I don't think that we'll be at 100% staffed.
That's right.
I think some of the projections that we showed you in our budget talks is we could even get to like 95% staffed and we would still be within that budget. So, again, I just, I have high hopes that we could be 100% staffed, but I don't think that it will happen.
What do you do if you get 100% staff and you've used all the excess money you budgeted this year to give everybody a raise and you're 100% staff next year? How you going to pay everybody?
She said she would come back to us.
That's what I said. I said,
Fiscal year 2025.
well, we're hoping that we'll be right at that number where we were last year. So we still, if we added new positions, and next year we'll have to add money to that salary budget. But we're hoping this year that will not happen. We hope to get a truer picture of where we really are.
To the 2024 fiscal year budget. I'm talking a year down the road.
Correct, yes, in '25. In '25, if we stay flat this year and we come back next year and we add new positions or add COLAs, merit increases, that obviously would mean we would have to ask for more money next year. But this year, that is not our intent.
Merit raises and other raises that in 2025, we're going to be,
We're not gonna be able to.
we're not going to be, we're going to be deficit spending, big time.
What he's saying is, well, we're not gonna be able to, in my opinion. We wouldn't be able to we would do it
That's
this
what I'm
time.
worried about.
And then we would not be, we could, but we'd be borrowing Peter to pay Paul. But I just don't think we'll get, my point is.
Fortunately, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's the only thing. My point
The only thing
is,
that's going to save us.
I just don't think we'll get to 100, so therefore, even though we're doing it this way, I feel like I'm okay with that because I just don't think in these times that we would ever get to 100%. And I know that's sad, but
It's true.
it's just
Yeah,
the facts.
it's true. It's just the nature
So-
of it right now. And this is the first time we've tried something like this. I hope it doesn't come back to bite us. But
mean-
we are, again, there is challenges to staffing right now.
I understand.
Yeah.
I want to be 100%, but if you take every nickel that we have saved because we were, 14% understaffed and you use that for pay, I'm just saying, it's going to be a rough 2025.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. That's the reason I asked that question. And I'm hoping that you're wrong, Jack. I'm hoping that the trends and the patterns that have shown themselves in the past 6 years, I guess now,
Or longer.
or longer, I hope they stay the same. So that gamble, I think is a good dice roll, in my opinion.
So if we're creating a net this year between new positions and defunded positions of $841,000. What did we add to last year's for cost of living and other raises, increases?
Last year?
From last year's budget during this year, what did we add?
Yeah, last year's budget, it was only a 2% that was added
COLA.
as merit, but we had added the previous quarter of the previous year. We had ordered a 5%.
7%.
Yeah.
7% total.
7%.
Total.
Of the total salary budget, which, or of the, wouldn't have been of the salary budget, but of the amount we had to pay.
So the question, if I may, Council President, the question is, when we do this, if we do this, are the workers going to be whole at that point or competitive with this move? That's the whole, the hope of it, right? Is that across the board, Mayor, if I'm thinking?
We did allow for a 2% cost of living increase and up to a 3% merit increase for every employee allotted by the city. There were some special merits that were like promised when they were maybe their initial hire or something like that, but pretty much every employee in the budget has a 2% COLA and then up to a 3% merit.
We do have some concerns about budgeting at you know, that, budgeting it flat when we're at 86%. We've always been real conservative with the outlook there, and I know that you're not gonna ever be 100% staffed for an entirety of a year, but that's sort of the buffer between where we are and the unexpected to me is in that we're gonna budget based on having every position filled from day one for the entirety of the year. We know that's not gonna happen, so we've got a little bit of margin in there, but if you eliminate that margin, it is gonna get really tricky
Gambling.
if, in the future to potentially continue offering raises, cost of living adjustments, things like that.
It's going to be tight. I mean, we know that, because if we get at 95%, I mean, we know we can get to a little over 95% staffed and still be under that budget that we had from last year. The other thing is there's a lot of overtime that needs to be managed better, to be honest. We won't have that cushion this year. And I have met with the leadership staff and I've told them, I said, the burden's going to be on you to manage some of that overtime as well. And on me to make sure they're managing that properly. So there was some, there will have to manage the overtime as well.
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you don't do it, you can't stay competitive. And then you can even lose, you don't have to worry about it. So it's kind of like, this would be a problem I would like to try to solve at getting 100%. Now we'll solve this problem because we've never been there, but without doing these moves, you'll never get there. You'll start losing because you have to stay competitive with the market.
I agree with you 100%, Kevin. I'm just saying, you still got to have it on your radar.
Yeah, it's something to think about, but I don't
Yeah,
see a choice, to be quite honest.
Aware of it. Now, we'll say this, it looks like about 270,000 in new utility positions, and I didn't back out the defunding. There's a little bit of that, a small amount. But on the utility positions, we still have the labor cost adjustment factor in there. So fortunately, in utilities always takes care of itself. In general government, it doesn't. You're at the mercy of your sales tax, your property tax.
Right.
But in utilities, we're supposed to be accounting for that with a labor cost adjustment factor. It's pass-through cost. That's a little
Yeah.
silver line.
Yeah, once the budget's passed, I go through there and do the labor adjustment, and then I give that to the utility supervisor so they can put it, so it's added to the bill.
We do that quarterly though, because is it based on how much we're actually paying or how much we budget?
So it's based on budget, but we pull actual from the previous year, and so it's a more or less a true up from comparing to actual to budget, and then every year that's the calculation that's been done since I've been here that I've followed back
We did
through.
it quarterly at one time. It's just a little more accurate, a little bit little bit more indicative of as our employment may go up and down during the year. May not matter, maybe in the noise.
So my question would be this, the question that I would have is how do you rebuild that, just a public question, even if I know the answer, how do you rebuild that fund? How do you rebuild that margin responsibly? Like, what's a plan? Because if we're doing it, we have to have a plan, right, to rebuild it? Like, we're thinking about that as well?
Rebuilding a fund? What?
So we're exhausting our margin, right? How do we get it back? Like, what's the plan to build that back?
I guess the margin is in
Yeah.
the flexibility of, okay, we budgeted 100% of these jobs, we only had 85 to 90% actually hired, and they didn't all start on, the first day of the first month of the budget cycle and work the entirety of the year. So that flex is gonna create that natural margin, but if you go up to the ceiling of that, I mean, you've got vehicles and equipment in the budget that don't get purchased during the year. You've got the staffing that doesn't get fully funded for the entirety of the year, and then hopefully you've got revenues that were budgeted conservatively that are coming in higher. So for example, this year, you got a week left in the budget cycle. I think, what is the ballpark? Any idea what kind of surplus?
That's what
we're looking at.
Surplus for this coming year? I do not right now. But, in the past, what I've seen the past 4 or 5, probably past 6 years, we've had a variance between how actual came and what actual budgets were. And that just rolls down into your fund balance. That's just, unused and showing you budget very conservative. Here's where it actually came in at. And, some years it's about $2 million.
Right.
And then, some years, so this year, that's where we're hoping that, based on this budget, that we're gonna actually come in at budget. That's really where you wanna come in at budget. And then come next year, you're gonna roll those, revenues possibly, 3% higher. That's what you project, that, it's gonna come in, and then next year, you may not have as many infrastructures that's gonna be going on, or capital improvements, or vehicles. You got some vehicles in this time.
Yeah.
I know.
So what I'm saying is, could we purposely, instead of putting those extras into a fund balance, can we purposely think about replacing the funds that we used in our payroll, our budget, particularly in that particular area? So if I spend money, or if I'm spending money, what I'm thinking is, okay, if I'm spending all my money, my thought is, how am I going to turn that back over? Like, that's my thought.
But your goal is for your balanced budget, that at the end of the year, really, is supposed to be your revenues and your expenses should match. What we've had is we've had surplus for the past couple years. We've had that surplus because of staffing, or we didn't, the revenues came in much higher. So last year's 22s was $7 million was put into your reserves that you didn't spend. Labor was down compared to budget. Revenues were high, or we didn't complete a project. So builds your fund balance up.
So it may be that we don't need the buffer. I mean, since we've been operating on a surplus the last couple of years anyway, even if we get 95+% staffing, we're still within the budgeted number, and if we go higher than that, we're expecting or hoping that we're still gonna have some of that surplus we've been dealing with the last couple of years that could cover that excess.
Or to
Well,
give
and
another
we
raise.
haven't,
is what
well,
I'm saying.
right.
So like,
And we
so-
haven't been using the fund balance for operations. We've been using that for capital projects.
Right.
So we've been able to do, but next year, keep in mind that if we don't transfer $7 million into the fund balance and we only transfer $2 million, it's because we didn't budget excess in salaries. I I mean, that's something you have to consider. The other thing is on the 3% merit increases and those other merit increases, they're not going to go into effect until December. So you're going to have a 2-month buffer there also. So, the COLAs we go ahead and put into effect once y'all vote on the budget. Then, we try to do it the next payroll. But then the merits, we say to give payroll and HR time, it's going to be December before those go into effect. So you have that 3% window there also that you've got a 2-month buffer on.
So just in a very general overview, my way of, I guess my preferred way of how you'd structure the budget would be, I'd rather be more dialed in and precise on the revenues, like we might be kind of conservative on our revenue expectations, and then be more conservative on the salary, because it just, there's something that doesn't feel right, even though we're not gonna be at 100%. It's something that doesn't feel right about not accounting for all the positions we're asking for and wanting to budget. So I would, in general, I would like to see us, okay, maybe we get a little bit more aggressive on the revenue numbers, stay more conservative on the salary expense, and then if there's a shortfall, or if there's a surplus in a given year, then you push that forward to the next year for capital projects, which is basically what happened this last year.
Correct. Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is that we're not even saying we're going to be 86% staff. We're saying we're going to be 95. We can meet that budget and with some excess at 95% staffed. So you're only talking that 5% window
Right.
if you are 100%. So please keep that in mind also.
All right.
If you take utilities off. I think it's all that discussion is based on general government employees.
All right.
Great discussion.
Kim, you can go ahead.
Yep.
Okay, do you have any more questions on? Okay, so next slide, talk about the total budget. So the total budget, it's 158,163,544. You have any questions on those? You can see the different funds there. We'll go to the next slide. And the next,
Spending though, right? These are
Go
all
back.
spending numbers, right?
spending and revenue. So it's being
Go
a.
back, go back for a minute.
Spending and revenue, but not,
Funny
it's
description.
not revenue per department. I mean. you
This
are
is,
willing
this
to-
is by fund. This is by fund. So your general fund, your revenues and your expenses is 58,579, not thousand, excuse me, million, 48,579,239.
So what is this number?
That includes grant income and borrowing as well, though, right?
Yes, yes,
Let's
So it's effectively you're spending money.
This is spending money, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes. The next slide is a comparison of the 2 years, from last year's, from 23's budget to 24's budget. And so what increases that number, and you look in the utilities, is the infrastructure, that's in water, electric. That's where you're seeing an increase in those budgets, and that's because of the infrastructure. Capital Projects Fund, you see that increase, and that is some projects that are in that fund where we're having some resurfacing. Those are just capital projects. The K-1 Center's in there. There's multitude of different grants. The Triangle property, that's what's in those capital projects funds. Have any questions on those? But you can just see the difference. If you see sanitation went down, it's because we had this equipment that we purchased this year, where in '24, we're reducing the amount of equipment that's being purchased. So you can see a decrease that's in sanitation fund. You have any questions on any of those?
One 129 to 158.
The next slide is showing you your sources of revenue, where you can see your ad valorem tax being 20%, local tax 35%, license and permits 12%. So you can see those are your large revenues. Any questions on those? Next is your expenditures. General government, 21%, public safety, 25%, public works, 15%, culture and recreation, those are all your parks, 24%. So those probably don't surprise you of how those come around, of how you spend general funds money. Have any questions there? Okay. Do this. So next is investments in your infrastructure for non-departmental facilities, in which you can see that's the library, Haven, Boys and Girls Club. You can see that total that's going to be spent on those facilities is $554,000. Have any questions there? And a lot of these were on the big sheets when we met, and this is just a summary. Recreation, $6 million in projects. You're familiar with these on Founders Park and Manley Park and the tennis center, pickleball courts. And so do y'all have any questions on those? Okay. Streets, on the streets department or throughout the city, $8,037,000. And again, it's going to be resurfacing. Some of these projects are sitting in the capital projects fund. We're still continuing to work on the Bratz, the Arts Alley, improvements to the Clock Corner. Any questions there? Next, the Civic Center, Nick Center, Museum, $366,000. Continuing with just resurfacing projects, building improvements, the continuing of the roof on this building. Next, at the golf course, $646,000, and that's from drainage improvements to cart path.
And that cost is going to go up. I'm just going to put it out there. If you hadn't played on the course lately, that cost is going to go up.
Next, we're in the utilities. In the gas department, $4,046,000. You're familiar with those projects. The cast iron replacement, this will start phase 1. Creek crossings. Any questions there? Electric department, $6.5 million. We'll continue with infrastructure improvements there. Any questions? Water department, $18.6 million. That's going to be adding additional water tanks, wells. Questions? Wastewater, $26.15 million. $13 million of that of the projects is for the Restore sewer projects that is being reimbursed through Restore, along with forced main and lift stations. Any questions?
Kim, too, real quick, I'd like to add on electric, $2 million of that too is money from AMEA for the AMI project. So again, that's $2 million in grants that will go towards that number that you see, the $6 million.
Now it's capital equipment for general government, $745,000. Police, $562,000. Fire department, $2 million. Recreation, $193,000. Streets department, $746,000. $1,000. Fleet maintenance, $196,000. Quail Creek, $194,000. Gas department, $47,000. Electric department, $562,000. Have any questions? I know I'm going really fast here. Water department, $171,000. Wastewater department, $787,000. Sanitation, $212,000. And then this is community appropriations, totaling $1.7 million. And you can see libraries, $919,000. Haven, $159,000. This includes your airport authority. That's the $320,000. You have any questions on any of those? And in your budget books, you had a detail of each one of those too. And then this last slide, just the 16 positions that were added as new positions to the budget. Do you have any questions there?
Council, any questions for Kim?
Okay, and then you had the sheet just so you can know from when you were given your budget book, the adjustments that were made. If you have any questions on any of those adjustments.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
All right, council, we'll move quickly through this. Do I have any committee updates? Start with Jack.
No, sir. No committee updates.
Corey?
Nothing.
Jimmy?
None here.
Kevin?
No.
I'll just briefly say we're going to set up a time for the Historic Preservation Committee to come to have a work session so we can sort of work through some of the issues that were brought up at the last work session on the ordinance and how we sort of get back on track moving forward on that. All right, and then quickly, we will go into the agenda itself. Well, I'll do department head updates, but if you got something on the agenda, come on up, let's talk about it. We got about 7 minutes. All right, seeing nothing. All right, what about we got a couple of ordinances for, item 6 is an ordinance for annexation utility board. Who's going to discuss that for City of Foley? All right, we'll talk about the ordinances then, and then we've got personnel, all right. Item 8, resolution, the City of Fairhope elects to come under provisions of 3621, authorizing employees to convert sick leave. We can talk about that. We have talked about that. Pre-application for the airport grant. Jack, is that something you'll discuss?
That's just our annual appropriation that we have, because we're the airport sponsor, we have to sign off on their pre-application.
Got it. 10, new replacement roof, Quail Creek Cart Barn. Okay. All right, installation of new fire alarm control panel for the Civic Center. Changing rules for Bike and Ped Committee.
They're just going to every other month. From once a month, for meeting once a month, every other month.
13 is the budget. 14, to impact fees. Is that to authorize the spending of impact fees for the budget?
Correct.
New positions, appropriate rates, 15, budget, 16. Yeah, do we want to talk about 16?
We can.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is basically when we started the well expansion project on County Road 33. We also knew that there would be other wells that would need to be upgraded, so this is part of that well expansion. This basically outlines the scope of work that will involve upgrading, adding a well on Fairhope Avenue, making the test well a production well, and adding another well out at Treatment Well 1. And then also looking at a hydraulic model, as well as doing test bores to look for areas for a new water tank, and then also doing test bores for additional wells as they're needed. In here, you will see a scope of work for that. You will also see a timeline. And with your permission, and if you grant this, then I will bring the engineer into the next meeting to discuss this in detail with y'all as we move forward.
Okay. All right. Item 17, purchase of a vehicle for the police department. Chief, you want to come up?
All right, this is an unbudgeted item. We're requesting to purchase a 23 Toyota Tacoma, and the funds are coming from two different locations, from a total loss insurance claim that we had earlier in the year, and then we're requesting the additional difference to come from the police DEA fund.
Okay. Council, any questions for the chief on item 17?
When it gets old, Jim, you'll buy it.
What kind of car is it?
It's a
What
Tacoma.
about 150?
He likes
Sounds like an
Tacomas?
accurate statement.
You like
You
Tacomas?
got
too?
one right
Like
now?
the bid on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All
It's a
right.
government bid.
And then chief, any
Always good to have
issues with
potential buyer.
item 18, which is the?
None.
Cherry Run, okay. All right, we'll break then. We'll try to come back at 6:05. We'll give us about 10 minutes and we'll come back and get started.